He was once seen as the symbol of a wild and unpredictable Hollywood. Nicolas Cage owned the $10 million Midford Castle in England, and a car collection worth tens of millions, including a Ferrari Enzo and a Lamborghini, once owned by the Shah of Iran. But behind the image of a modern-day king was a life riddled with cracks. $3 million tax debt that led the IRS to seize many of his prized possessions. A whirlwind marriage to Lisa Marie Presley that lasted just 107 days. And a private life so enigmatic it stirred suspicion and nearly pushed him to the edge of Hollywood exile. But Nicolas Cage didn't run. Instead of retreating quietly, he pressed on, taking on up to 8 films a year, slowly working his way back without making a scene. How does someone once dismissed as eccentric, someone who lost it all, manage to rise again, not just as a star, but as a figure who transcends both glory and failure today? We step into the world of Nicolas Cage, a world shaped by grit, solitude, and a quiet, relentless passion that forged a legend unlike any other. If you enjoy these stories, please remember to hit the like button. It really helps us out, and feel free to leave a comment below. He carried the prestigious Coppola name but lived in poverty, mocked by friends, trapped in the shadow of his own family. Nicolas once washed dishes and sold newspapers just to help his parents make ends meet. And then one night, after a heated argument led his mother to walk out of the house, he stood in front of a mirror, erased his lineage, and chose a new name, Nicolas Cage. What gives a child the courage to abandon everything to start over with nothing but a name and a dream most people would call crazy? In late 1960s Long Beach, the sound of the ocean was constant. But for a young boy in a cramped apartment, life was anything but easy. His father, a literature professor, loved books and philosophy, but his income was far from steady. His mother, a modern dancer, was often away on tour, leaving long, quiet stretches in a home barely bigger than a garage. Nicolas became captivated by James Dean, not just for the rebellious spirit, but for the eyes that seemed abandoned every night. Nicolas would rehearse in front of the mirror, mimicking every look, every line, trying to make the voice his own. On weekends, he would sneak into old drive-in theaters, lying low between rows of rusty car seats, just to lose himself in stories that weren't his. But the real world didn't offer much kindness. At school, they called him the dreamer who didn't know his place. Classmates laughed when he said he wanted to be an actor. Once, a group of kids even chased him down, shouting that he was a spoiled rich kid trying to act poor. In truth, the Coppola name brought no privilege, only pressure. Nicolas knew that one mistake, and people would say, "You're just Francis Ford Coppola's nephew." No one really saw him for who he was. All they saw was the towering legacy behind him. Then, one night, after his mother left again for another tour, with no promise of return, Nicolas stood quietly in front of an old mirror. A flickering ceiling bulb cast a pale light on his thin face and restless eyes. In that moment, he knew if he wanted to be himself, he had to let go of the name. He chose Cage, inspired by Luke Cage, the African-American superhero, strong, self-made, no one pulling the strings. For Nicolas, the new name wasn't just a choice. It was a line in the sand, a decision between living under a shadow or walking into the darkness and finding his own light. He didn't know how far he would go, but he knew one thing: Nicolas Cage would be unlike anyone else. Could a name alone carry him all the way to Hollywood, the place where dreams often exist only on a movie screen? A brief, forgettable role, just a few seconds on screen, yet it was enough for Nicolas Cage to stake his entire future, just for a chance to be seen as himself. What gives a young, unknown actor the courage to pursue a path even his own family doubted? At 18, Cage landed a minor part in the teen film Fast Times at Ridgemont High. No one noticed his short appearance. Most of his scenes were cut from the final version. But to Cage, It wasn't a failure. It was the first trembling step on a path he had dreamed of since childhood. He kept accepting small, quiet roles in films like Rumblefish and Valley Girl, learning the craft not through connections, but through real experience. There was no special treatment that came with the Coppola name. On the contrary, it raised doubts. Many assumed he was only in the industry because of his family, not because of genuine passion. In an early interview, Cage once said, "I stepped out of that shadow so no one could say I was handed anything." At the time, Nicolas was living in a modest rental apartment in Los Angeles. Every day began with knocking on casting doors, hoping a small opportunity would come. There were days he was rejected outright, asked to leave the room because his acting style was too strange. But instead of giving up, he returned the next day with the same audition piece, only this time with a steadier gaze. That persistence would become his trademark. His struggles weren't only financial. There was also the loneliness of trying to survive in a city built on half-finished dreams. Nicolas once shared that there were long nights when he couldn't sleep, just staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was wasting his youth chasing something no one believed in. Then came Leaving Las Vegas, a script about a broken man, drinking himself to death, hardly a major studio project. But there was something in that role that Nicolas recognized, something personal. He did something few people know. He had two of his teeth removed by choice to feel the same physical pain the character lived with. No one asked him to. It was entirely his decision, a move some called crazy. But to Cage, it was the only way to fully inhabit the role. At first, the film crew didn't know what to make of it, but once the camera rolled, they were stunned. What appeared on screen wasn't just acting, it was a soul falling apart. His performance was so raw, so intimate, that several crew members had to leave the room during the first playback. Not because it wasn't good, because it was too real. That role took Nicolas Cage to the stage of the 1995 Academy Awards. When his name was announced, it wasn't just a win over other nominees. It was a victory over years of doubt, over the quiet fear of never being taken seriously, a win over the loneliness that haunted him throughout his early career. But once the lights dimmed, could Nicolas have known that a financial storm was quietly waiting just around the corner? After winning the Oscar in 1995, many thought Nicolas Cage would become more selective with his roles. But he did the opposite. Cage threw himself into film as if every part might be his last chance to live truthfully. He didn't rest. He didn't wait. He just kept moving forward. From the late 90s through the early 2000s, his name lit up movie theaters across the globe. The Rock, Con Air, Face Off, National Treasure, each one different, each character distinct. One day he was an FBI agent, the next a fugitive, then a historian chasing America's lost treasures. Critics sometimes questioned his choices, but the audience never turned away. Cage never wanted stability. He wanted challenge. At times he failed. At times, he was praised to the skies in adaptation. Matchstick Men, but whether the reviews were good or bad, people always had to watch him. And eventually, that relentless drive paid off. At his peak, Nicolas Cage was among the highest-paid actors in Hollywood, earning up to $40 million in a single year and commanding $15 to $20 million per major role. At the height of his career, his net worth was estimated at over $150 million. But Cage wasn't chasing money alone. To him, wealth was a doorway into dreams that once existed only in his imagination. It was during this golden period that he began building a world of his own, one of ancient stone walls, vintage cars, and oceanfront mansions cloaked in silence. Unlike other Hollywood stars who favor sleek modern estates with glass walls and infinity pools, Cage chose homes with history, places that had aged, not just existed. He didn't buy houses to show off. He bought them to retreat. Each home reflected something deeper in him, timeless, eccentric, solitary, and a little haunted. In England, he spent about $10 million on Midford Castle, an 18th-century fortress, perched on a rocky hill in Somerset, designed in the shape of a cross, surrounded by ancient oaks and winter fog. No modern luxuries, just thick stone walls and arched windows looking out to the forest. Cage once said he preferred living among old stones because stones don't speak, but they always stay. It wasn't just a home, it was a fortress for a fragile soul. In the U.S., he owned an $8.5 million mansion in Las Vegas, over 12,000 square feet of gold leaf ceilings, spiral staircases, and a furniture collection sourced from across Europe and Asia. The place overflowed with mounted animal heads, antique books, fossilized bones, and oil paintings. Some called it an eccentric museum, but for Cage, it was a way of organizing memory. Every object held a story, a relic from a character, a time, a dream long gone. In Malibu, he owned a Mediterranean-style home tucked into a hillside, facing the Pacific Ocean, valued at over $10 million. The house caught the soft glow of the setting sun through thick glass, casting gentle light across dark wooden floors like a scene from an old film. A notebook always sat beside his chair, where he scribbled notes for roles not yet born. For Cage, homes didn't need crowds. They needed depth. And perhaps most private of all was a secluded island in the Bahamas, purchased for about $3 million. No yacht, no parties, just a wooden cabin facing white sands. Cage would go there alone, no press, no bodyguards, just a few books, a guitar, and a man trying to rediscover himself after living through so many characters. To Nicolas Cage, real estate wasn't just about value, it was about creating space for the artist within him to breathe. A man forever teetering between dream and reality, noise and stillness. If homes were his sanctuaries, then cars were how he entered the world. But, like everything else in his life, Cage's garage was not a showroom, it was a memory vault. Each car carried its own story, a supporting character that traveled with him through each chapter of life. At the top of the list, a Ferrari Enzo worth over $2.5 million, one of only 400 ever made. Cage had the seats custom-stitched in black leather with red thread, his initials, NC, embroidered into the headrests. But he rarely drove it. The car sat under a black velvet cover deep in the garage, less a vehicle, more a trophy. "I don't drive it around," he once said. "I sit in it when I need to remind myself that I once made it." In contrast, the Rolls-Royce Phantom was his go-to during press tours and award shows. Glossy black, with tinted windows, mahogany interior, and a sound system tuned specifically for Beethoven and Johnny Cash, the two artists Cage credited with keeping him grounded on the road to fame. Not every car was flashy. One of his most treasured pieces was a Lamborghini Miura SV, once owned by the Shah of Iran, valued at over $1 million. Cage never altered its dashboard, not even the scratch on the door handle. "I want the car to keep its history." He once shared in a rare interview, "It's a witness." Some days. He drove himself to set in a 1970 Plymouth Barracuda, worn paint, faded film on the rear window, and a broken pencil jammed between the seats next to a wrinkled old script, as if every time he got behind the wheel, he was returning to the man no one had yet discovered. There's even a story of someone spotting Cage dusting off the Barracuda before a storm like it wasn't just a car, but an old friend. The one thing his entire garage had in common wasn't price, it was personality. Some people collect cars to impress. He kept them to live alongside. Each machine held a piece of him, fragments too complex for the screen. And just like his cars, the way Nicolas Cage lives, how he spends, what he hides, what he treasures is unlike anyone else. He was once called Hollywood's most mysterious star, not because he was strange, but because he never fit the mold. In Cage's world, extravagance and empathy are not opposites, they coexist, like two sides of the same coin. He once spent hundreds of thousands on a dinosaur skull, then gave $2 million to Amnesty International to help displaced families. He donated $1 million to victims of Hurricane Katrina and has taken part in numerous humanitarian campaigns as a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. Cage never made a spectacle of his charity. He didn't want cameras capturing gift handouts or ceremonial speeches. He gave quietly. He lived that way too low-key, but with layers. He collects old paintings, taxidermy, and rare books. His personal library includes first editions from Poe, Shelley, and Lovecraft. Some evenings, he'll sit with a glass of red wine, reading a dusty horror novel under a desk lamp, jotting down thoughts for a role not yet cast. To Nicolas Cage, that isn't relaxation, it's a way of being. And after several broken marriages, perhaps the greatest surprise of all is where he found peace in the quiet companionship of someone much younger, Rico Shibata, nearly 30 years his junior. They met in Japan during an unplanned trip and quietly married in early 2021 in a small ceremony in Las Vegas. Cage once said Rico wasn't from the Hollywood world, and that was exactly why she gave him peace. They rarely appear in public, but now and then, people spot them walking together in the late afternoon. No bodyguards, no cameras, just two people, hand in hand, in quiet understanding. Among the castles, the million-dollar cars, and the glow of the silver screen, Nicolas Cage has always carried one unshakable belief that strangeness isn't something to hide, it's something to protect. And now, as the lights slowly fade, the world is beginning to see Cage, not just as an actor, but as a character in his own right, real, singular, and impossible to copy. There was a time when, standing at the peak of his fame, it seemed nothing could bring Nicolas Cage down. But then, everything began to unravel, not on the movie set, but in real life. In 2009, headlines across the US broke the news Nicolas Cage had been hit by the IRS for over $6.3 million in unpaid taxes. The properties, once praised for their artistic flair, castles, villas, private islands, were now up for sale. Many were sold at steep losses. His Rhode Island mansion, purchased for $15.7 million, was let go for under $6.5 million. Cage didn't point fingers, but he did file a lawsuit against his former financial manager, accusing him of reckless investments and mismanagement that left Cage unable to track his own cash flow. The courts, however, didn't rule in his favor. That loss wasn't just about money, it was a blow to his pride. A man once proud of his disregard for wealth, now suffocating under the weight of what he once dismissed. At the same time, his personal life was falling apart. His marriage to Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's daughter, lasted just 107 days. Not long after, a whirlwind marriage to Erica Koik ended in annulment after only 4 days, drawing relentless tabloid attention and making Cage the punchline on late-night talk shows. And yet, what earned Cage lasting respect wasn't his fall, but the way he chose to respond. He didn't retire. He didn't disappear. Nicolas Cage did the exact opposite. He kept working, taking on 6 to 8 films a year, no matter the budget or the spotlight. From low-budget action flicks like Primal and Willy's Wonderland to indie projects like Color Out of Space, Pig, and Dream Scenario, he kept going. No complaints, no filter, no pause. When asked why he kept working without rest, he gave a short, honest answer: I owe, and I won't quit acting. While repaying his debts, Cage also quietly rebuilt his personal life. In 2021, he married Rico Shibata, a fresh start, calm and without fanfare. And step by step, Nicolas Cage reclaimed his place not through box office glory, but through the quiet resilience of a man who had lost everything and kept moving forward. And in that moment when it seemed everything had fallen apart, Nicolas Cage left the world silent, with a question he never had to speak. What keeps a man standing when all the lights have gone out? Nicolas Cage isn't just an actor. He's living proof of a kind of person we used to see more often in the old world, the kind who lives fully, dares to fail, and never pretends to be anyone but himself. Nearly 40 years in the business, over 100 roles, hundreds of personas: madmen, drifters, fragile fathers, reluctant heroes. Nicolas Cage never confined himself to one type of character. And maybe that's why no one's ever been able to put a single label on him. He's an artist known for puzzling choices, but within each of those decisions is a kind of bravery few dare to embrace. He kept working when he had nothing, took on low-budget films after winning an Oscar, accepted odd, risky roles when people begged him to go back to the mainstream. Cage's greatest legacy isn't a trophy, it's the way he's endured in a world that changes too fast. While others played it safe, he went deeper into the self, into risk, into uncharted territory. He never feared being misunderstood, and maybe that's why he never lost himself. Younger generations may know Cage through internet memes, or those infamous wild movie scenes. But for those who've followed him across decades of cinema, one truth stands out: Nicolas Cage never gave up. He's never played a role the easy way, and he's never lived life by a script someone else wrote. Now, in his 60s, Cage isn't slowing down. National Treasure 3 is on its way. His upcoming portrayal in Joe Exotic promises to be yet another bold step into the unknown. You may not see him often on red carpets anymore, but behind the scenes, he's still quietly writing the next chapter using the language he knows best: film. And when people look back on the life of Nicolas Cage, what they remember may not be the films alone, but the message he left behind. Don't live to please others. Live as if it's the last role you'll ever play. And what about you, in your hardest moments? What helped you get back up and keep going? Share your story in the comments. You never know, someone out there might need to hear exactly that. Right now.